In 2022, we celebrate 130 years of HBCU football. On December 27th, 1892, Livingstone and Biddle College, now known as Johnson C. Smith University, played in Salisbury, North Carolina, with Biddle winning 5-0. Over time, HBCU football has evolved. HBCU football's popularity continues to rise. Millions attend games each year and millions more watch on television. The HBCU bands provide some of the top entertainment in the country. Over that time, some of the best players to ever play in the National Football League played at HBCUs. Every Monday through Friday on the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, national radio and television host Donal Ware takes a look at what's happening in HBCU football and talks with coaches, players, administrators, and media about the 2022 season. Make sure you join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag HBCU130. Now, here's your host, Donal Ware.
This is the HBCU Football Daily Podcast for today, Tuesday, November 1st. I'm Donal Ware. Look how the months have passed. We started this podcast on July the 18th. It's already November the 1st. We've got some weeks remaining in HBCU football. Still a lot of football left. And of course, you know, this is Takeaway Tuesday. As we get things started, we're going to talk about the HBCU National Players of the Week. First of all, Antonio Meac, the wide receiver for Tuskegee. 6 receptions, 212 yards, 2 touchdowns in the ball game in Tuskegee's 28-7 victory over Kentucky State. And so with the victory, Tuskegee wraps up the SIAC's Western Division. We've got some more to talk about with respect to the SIAC. The other HBCU National Player of the Week, Bashul Tootin, the running back from North Carolina A&T, was telling you guys about him at the midway point. One of my top 5 players to watch. 30 carries, a career high 30 carries, a career high 256 yards, 2 touchdowns in the Aggies' 45-38 comeback victory over Campbell. It was a great ball game. A&T was down 28-10 after the end of the first quarter. It was an emotional win. It was a special win. It was big time for North Carolina A&T, who remains on top or at the top of the Big South, along with Gardner-Webb, who defeated Bryant. Now, these two teams are going to meet the last game of the season on November 19th. But as I mentioned, a lot of football left to be played. And really, you're talking about 2 football games in between now and then before the 2 teams meet. A&T meets Norfolk State this Saturday. So that's a non-conference game before on the 12th, hosting Charleston Southern, as a matter of fact. Taking a look at the polls, no surprise, Jackson State number 1, especially and specifically unanimous number 1 in the coaches poll. You've got Jackson State, followed by Florida A&M, North Carolina Central, North Carolina A&T, and Prairie View A&M are your 1 through 5. 6 through 10 look like this: Southern, Alabama State, Texas Southern, Hampton, and Howard. With South Carolina State's loss to Morgan State, South Carolina State drops out of the poll. So the defending champs drop out of the poll. One of my takeaways is going to be that it's obviously the season is not over, that is, for South Carolina State. In the media poll, Jackson State number 1, followed by Benedict, who remains undefeated. So those are the only 2 teams in HBCU football that are undefeated. Benedict number 2, Florida A&M number 3, North Carolina Central number 4, Albany State rounds out the top 5. 6 through 10 looks like this: Virginia Union, Tuskegee, Southern, North Carolina A&T, and Prairie View A&M. So you're looking at A&T and Prairie View A&M are your teams that re-enter the media poll. So last week I did this long soliloquy, right, about the Division II regional and specifically the Super Region 2. And so come to find out, I mentioned Albany State was number 1, Benedict number 2. Those teams were in alphabetical order, not the ranking of the team. So for the first time, the rankings have come out, and At the top of the heat, well, Benedict is number 2. Okay, but Delta State is number 1 at the top of the heat. And then let me look at this. Let's see. You've got Wingate at number 3. You've got West Florida at number 4. Virginia Union is number 5. Tusculum is number 6. And Tuskegee is number 7. Albany State 8, Limestone 9, Fayetteville State 10. So if you're Albany State, Albany State's got some work to do. Okay. Albany State's got some work to do. Tuskegee is right there at number 7. The top 7 teams go to the playoffs. So Tuskegee's got to win its next game. I would think and that's where it becomes tricky. Should a conference championship game hurt you if you lose? I think we've seen in recent years in the Division II regional where a championship game win can help you, but a loss doesn't necessarily hurt you. But I mean, if you're Tuskegee, you got to win that regular season game. So you lose that, win the championship. That's a whole nother scenario, particularly when you have Benedict at number 2 right now. Even if Benedict lost, I would say if Benedict, even if it lost its next 2 games, meaning next week and then the championship game, because it's already wrapped up the Eastern Division, I would think Benedict would still get in. Now, it used to be, and it may still be, that they used to call something earned access, where because there are no automatic bids in Division II football. But what would happen is if there was a conference that was not in the top 7, then a conference, they would try to seed that particular conference. So in essence, at least one conference member is represented. So at least that each conference is going to be represented. I mentioned the Gulf Coast. I mentioned the SAC, or the South Atlantic Conference, CIAA, and SIAC are your 4 conferences that make up the super region number 2. So a lot of work for Tuskegee to do. Virginia Union's got to maintain, because Shawan beats Elizabeth City State. Shawan is in the CIAA championship game. Virginia Union is out. So Virginia Union's got to make sure it wins its game against Virginia State. A loss by Virginia Union, I think, by Virginia Union to Virginia State, I think Virginia Union's out. And the Fayetteville State's got a lot of work to do at number 10. I think even with a win to end the season and a win, let's say, in the conference championship, you never know if it's Virginia Union and a win over Fayetteville State may help the Broncos. And I would even venture to say that it'd be between those 2 teams. So if Virginia Union and Fayetteville State played in the championship game, the winner of that game would go to the Division II playoffs. That's sort of how I see things. So let's look at some of the takeaways from the week. I think Tennessee State's loss to Murray State was huge. Scoring 3 points in the game, and your Tennessee State atop the OVC to a Murray State team that hadn't lost. That's huge. I mean, can you bounce back from that? We'll see. I just, when you have these opportunities, you got to take advantage of the opportunities. And, unfortunately, Tennessee State did not. And Tennessee State had won 3 straight games and then lost that football game. So that's not a good loss. Takeaway number 2, I look at the Meac, right? Because if we look at the Meac, you have a situation in the Meac now where it's wide open. I mean, if Howard wins out, which I don't know, listen, Howard's won 2 games in a row, 2 big games, right? Defeated Norfolk State this week, defeated Delaware State 2 weeks ago. Can Howard sustain this? Now, Quentin Williams, the quarterback, is playing well. Howard is a different team than the team we saw over the first 5 weeks of the season or so. 4 or 5 weeks of the season. So it's a different team. Can the Bison sustain? We'll see. Right now, I would say I don't think so. We'll see, right? Still got to play South Carolina State. Still got to play North Carolina Central. still got some of the tougher games. The Bison still have some of the tougher games ahead of them. So let's assume Howard loses at least one more game. Now, everybody's back in it, although Delaware State's 2 games back in a tiebreaker to both Howard and North Carolina Central. I mean, Delaware State's still in it, but like what was said on the conference call today, we were in the driver's seat, then we were in the passenger seat of the car. Now we're hanging on the bumper. I thought that was a great analogy when you're talking about Delaware State. North Carolina Central would still very much be in it. Even Morgan State's got an outside shot. Big win over South Carolina State. South Carolina State still in it as we sit right now. Norfolk State sort of on the outside looking in as well. So, these 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks remaining, absolutely critical for teams in the Meac. And really right now, everybody's still in it. That's the thing. Rod Milstead, the head coach of Delaware State, mentioned it. And he talked a lot about the Meac, the physicality, that the Meac plays great football, which it always has. I mean, I think you would say now that if we're looking at it right now, the SWAC is probably better than the Meac from the vantage points. First of all, it's got way more teams. Like you're looking at, 12 football teams. It's a lot of teams to the Meac's 5, right? South Carolina State is down right now. But again, right now, the champion, the defending champ, is South Carolina State out of the Meac. Celebration Bowl winners, there was only one SWAC champion, and that was Grambling State in 2016 over North Carolina Central. So while the balance of power may have, it remains to be seen if it really has shifted. I don't know that. I would just say again, SWAC, it's got way more football teams. You got Jackson State, who's number 1, unanimous number 1, top 5 in FCS, but it's still a lot of football left to be played. And ultimately, we're going to see how it's settled on the field. Now, the Celebration Bowl doesn't determine the HBCU national champion. It helps, and it just so happens that all of the years we've had the Celebration Bowl, the national champion was determined, with the exception of 2020 when there was spring 2021. That was the only year. Otherwise, and that's the spring of 2021. Otherwise, and of course, the HBCU coaches and media polls determine it. I think it still does. It just so happens that the winner of the Celebration Bowl was deemed HBCU national champions. So that's takeaway number 2. Takeaway number 3, North Carolina A&T playing some really good football right now. 5 straight wins after starting the season off 0-3. Got down to Campbell 28-10. I mean, it was unbelievable. The penalties that were being called. I mean, Campbell played up-tempo, just an up-tempo style of game. It was like the play was over within 10 seconds, okay? Basically. A lot of times Campbell was running another play. North Dakota State played some up-tempo against A&T. Duke played some up-tempo against A&T. Campbell's up-tempo was way faster than both Duke and North Dakota State. Yet somehow the Aggies persevered. The defense started to come to life. After Campbell scored on its first 4 possessions, A&T's defense then came to life and really started to shut down that Campbell offense. And shut it down to the tune of, over the next 3 quarters, Campbell only scored 7 points. So you're looking at an A&T team that's really, really hot right now. And so that's I mean, in a non-conference game, coming up with an opportunity at the Big South. 2 Big South games remaining. A&T needs to win both, especially the way Gardner-Webb is playing. And Gardner-Webb got after A&T on last year. So we'll ultimately see what happens there. You've got, takeaway number 4. Congrats to Tuskegee. Congrats to Fayetteville State. Congrats to Benedict. All of those teams have wrapped up respective divisions and now looking at championship play. For Fayetteville State, it's going to be the 5th straight year in the CIAA championship game. We'll see if the 5th year is in fact the charm for the Broncos. So those are some of my takeaways from week 9 in HBCU football, sprinkled in with a little bit of talking about the Division II regional rankings. We continue to mourn the loss of Mr. Eric Moore. What a phenomenal legacy that he left for a lot of us, right? Most of us. And when with the boom of the internet in the 90s, I know a lot of younger people don't understand that, but I was, college when the internet kind of came around, and, what he did in the promotion and the publicity of HBCU sports cannot be talked about enough. And so on the weekend edition of Box to Row, can be heard on a radio station near you, we're going to talk about the legacy of Eric Moore. Don't forget to tell a couple of friends about the HBCU Football Daily Podcast, where you can find us on our website, boxtorow.com, also on iHeartMedia.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch the HBCU Football Daily Podcast on our on our YouTube page, on the Box to Row, on the Box to Row YouTube page. Talk with you tomorrow.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the HBCU Football Daily Podcast. You can also listen to the podcast at boxtorow.com, iHeartMedia, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to get your HBCU football fix on Box to Row with Donal Ware each weekend on the radio station near you, and on SiriusXM on HBCU, Channel 142, and on ESPNU Radio on SiriusXM, Channel 84. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Box to Row for the latest in HBCU football, and don't forget to tell a friend.